Billionaires are mass buying massive underground bunkers. They're pouring absolute fortunes into private military security.
Right. And paying complete strangers to carry their children.
Exactly. And according to this incredibly dense, just wild stack of documents we are analyzing today, they aren't doing this out of like some normal everyday fear of physical death.
No, they're doing it because they know exactly when the next system reset is coming.
And under that exact same theoretical framework, the one that explains the bunkers, Satan is actually not the ultimate adversary. He's not, the grand enemy of God.
Yeah, he is literally just a hired middle manager in a cosmic amusement park. And every single human being currently alive on this planet, we are the tickets.
So the ultimate question we are posing to you today is this: who actually owns this amusement park? And did we voluntarily choose to be trapped inside it?
That is the core architecture we really need to dismantle today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is venturing into some intensely provocative territory. We are examining this highly complex internet theory drawn from a web of anonymous manifestos, deep web philosophical texts, suppressed historical documents, all of it.
Right, and it attempts to decode the ultimate motives of the global elite, the cyclical nature of human history, and really the hidden structure of reality itself.
Yeah. And to be totally clear right from the start, as analysts, we are remaining completely impartial here. We are not like endorsing this material.
Absolutely not. We're looking at this as a thought experiment. Our goal is purely to synthesize the wild, intricate logic presented in these specific sources. We just want to understand how this grand theory connects the dots of human suffering.
Right. We're just reverse engineering the blueprint they provided. And the theory is vast, but it builds upon a very specific foundation regarding the nature of power. So let's start there.
The elites.
Yeah, look at the elites of the world. Meaningless, endless wars, recurring global economic crises, the persistent whispers of horrifying rituals at the very top. The standard reaction from an average person is just to assume, well, they're just incredibly bad, greedy people.
But looking at the historical logic of power, just being bad doesn't actually hold up as a sustainable motive.
Right. I mean, it just doesn't.
It doesn't hold up historically or logically. The source text points out a very cold reality about dictatorships and empires.
Mm.
I mean, even the most ruthless conquerors in human history, think Genghis Khan or Roman emperors, they built infrastructure.
Yeah, they built roads, aqueducts.
Exactly. Legal systems that benefited them and their inner circle. You have to provide for your generals and your citizens to some degree, or they overthrow you. Endless destruction without a profit margin is entirely illogical.
Because even if you're a tyrant, you create a system where your subordinates have like an incentive to keep the machine running. I see the logic, but wait. Even a mob boss makes sure his capos get paid so they don't turn on him.
Right.
You're saying the actions of the modern global elite, at least according to this theory, run contrary to basic selfish human preservation.
According to this framework, yes. Because their preservation model isn't based on maintaining our current society. The source theorizes their true motive isn't financial greed.
Wealth is irrelevant to them at this stage.
Completely irrelevant. Their motive is hidden knowledge. They know about the cycles of civilization. They know a reset is coming. And their actions are designed to ensure they are the only ones left standing when the dust settles.
Stop. Here is where it breaks for a normal person. If there are engineered resets, that means our current normal civilization is just one iteration. We aren't the first.
Far from it.
And it implies that the bizarre, destructive decisions of the elites aren't political mistakes. They are conscious, calculated preparations to survive the collapse of this specific iteration.
But if the elites have a calculated, albeit incredibly dark, motive for what they do, it forces us to look higher up the chain of command. If even the worst human villains build structures of benefit for their in-group, what is Satan's motive for causing thousands of years of apparently profitless destruction?
And this is where the text drops its most radical theological shift. It argues that Satan has absolutely no free will.
Which contradicts almost every mainstream interpretation of Western theology. I mean, he is supposed to be the ultimate rebel who chose to fall from grace.
I know. The idea of a rebel without free will sounds like a total oxymoron. But the source justifies it by completely redefining what free will actually is. It argues that no animal or plant has free will.
Right, a wolf doesn't choose to be a predator. It is ruled entirely by the instincts of nature.
Exactly. A human being, however, is the only creature that can consciously go against its own biological survival instinct. A person can choose to fast for weeks for a spiritual belief or, sadly, choose to end their own life.
That ability to override nature is the text definition of true free will.
And if we apply that definition to Satan, the argument is that if he actually possessed free will, he wouldn't sit around for millennia doing the exact same monotonous task, tempting, punishing, destroying.
Over thousands of years, an immortal being with genuine agency would have eventually broken off from the divine system and built his own beneficial empire.
Right. He'd build a functioning utopia for his followers, if only to maintain his own power base and stroke his ego. Wait, this means?
He is merely an executor.
Yes. He isn't the rebellious boss of the underworld. He's an automated mechanism. He is the right-hand man for an entity that specifically requires continuous, unending destruction.
He is following a strict protocol without deviation. He is a tool. And if he is just a tool, we have to look at the entity holding it.
Which points directly to what the texts call the Lord.
The theory argues that the Lord needs Satan as an instrument of fear. Satan's job is to keep humans perpetually distracted, bouncing between base material desires and outright terror.
So their consciousness never elevates above simple survival. And this brings us to a massive point of cognitive dissonance for anyone raised in Western traditions. The text claims, and leans heavily on very specific ancient interpretations to back this up, that God and the Lord are absolutely not the same entity.
The documents dive incredibly deep into linguistic and apocryphal roots to make this case. In the canonical Bible, the term the Lord is very frequently a translation of Yahweh.
Right.
But if you look at various Gnostic texts, many of which were discovered in the Nag Hammadi library in 1945 and historically suppressed, Yahweh is not viewed as the ultimate creator. He is seen as a demiurge.
A middle manager, an architect of the physical universe, but essentially a lower-level deity.
Correct. Conversely, the supreme ultimate God in the earliest texts often translates from the word Elohim.
But Elohim is a plural word. It literally translates to gods.
It does. And the theory uses this linguistic split to separate the two realms. The Lord, or the demiurge, is the architect of this specific physical reality. The earth, the solar system, the material trap.
While the supreme God, the Elohim, is something entirely different, infinite beyond material comprehension.
And the source gets incredibly specific here. It pulls from an apocryphal text that was cut from the canonical Bible called the Apocalypse of Adam.
Oh yeah, the phrasing they highlight there is just chilling. It says, the Lord didn't gift life to humanity. He locked the divine spirit inside the human body.
Oh, the physical body is not a vessel for experiencing grace. It is a containment unit, a golden trap.
A cage made of meat and bone.
Which forces us to ask another fundamental question about mechanics. If the Lord is just a lower-tier architect, what is his motive? Why design a physical world that is filled with such immense, breathtaking beauty, but also such horrific, inescapable pain?
The source has an analogy for this, and honestly, if you've ever wondered why hitting a stretch of good luck in your life almost always seems to be followed by a sudden, inexplicable disaster, this text would argue that it's not a coincidence. The demiurge's motive isn't to make you happy, but it's also not to make you suffer just for the sake of suffering. The motive is the fullness of emotional experience. It is an amusement park. It's a roller coaster.
Think about the physics of a roller coaster. You don't buy a ticket to ride on a perfectly flat track. There's no energy generated on a flat track.
Exactly. You buy the ticket for the terrifying drops. You want the slow, beautiful, anticipating climb to the top, and you want the screaming, stomach-churning plummet.
The demiurge requires a world where you experience the unparalleled joy of holding your newborn child and the absolutely crushing, devastating grief of profound loss.
He needs the full emotional spectrum to generate energy. And Satan. Satan is just the chief engineer making sure the track is steep enough to keep the riders terrified.
But we have to keep moving up the chain of command to understand the origin of all this. If the demiurge is just the architect building the roller coaster who instructed him to gather all this emotional experience in the first place.
Right. Why does this raw data of human suffering and joy need to be harvested at all?
The source points to the absolute top of the pyramid, the supreme infinite. What ancient proto-religions referred to as the ether, the chaos, or the absolute nothingness.
Imagine an entity that is truly infinite. It has no boundaries. It has no physical edges. Because it is literally everything that exists, there's absolutely nothing outside of it.
You just described the most terrifying loneliness imaginable.
Right. A total infinite consciousness with no boundaries, no mirror, and no other to interact with. But hold on, a formless infinite void feeling lonely. That sounds like we're projecting human psychological insecurities onto the cosmos.
Yeah.
How does the text justify giving a supreme infinite being a human flaw?
It's not loneliness in the emotional human sense. It's a structural impossibility of self-awareness. Think about it. An eye cannot see itself without a mirror.
Okay.
A consciousness cannot understand its own boundaries or its own nature if it has nothing to interact with. It
Yep.
cannot ask, who am I? Because there is no other to provide contrast. It just exists, eternal, solitary, and fundamentally stagnant.
So, the only way for the infinite to understand itself, the only way to cure that structural blindness was to shatter.
Exactly.
It had to break its own infinite consciousness into millions and millions of fragments, and it had to voluntarily erase the memories of those fragments and throw them into a closed, limited physical system so they could interact with each other and generate friction.
To experience itself from the inside out.
Which leads to the biggest, most mind bending reveal of this entire deep dive. If the infinite shattered into millions of amnesiac fragments to populate this physical simulation,
We are those fragments.
we are the shattered infinite spirits. We are the supreme being, essentially playing an incredibly high stakes game of hide and seek with itself.
And according to this text, we voluntarily stood in line for this. We chose the maximum difficulty setting.
Because if you are an eternal, immortal spirit, you inherently know that true death doesn't exist. There is no real danger. So why would you choose a boring, easy, pain-free life simulation? You wouldn't.
You would ask for the hardest, most visceral, most terrifying ride available. Wars, famine, heartbreak. In this framework, they aren't glitches in the matrix. They are the premium content we paid for.
But here's where the mechanics of the system become critical. What happens when the game breaks?
What's fascinating here is what happens when one of those human fragments wandering around the amusement park suddenly realizes they are actually a piece of the supreme infinite.
The system glitches. Because if you realize the roller coaster isn't real, you stop screaming. You stop generating the emotional energy, the terror, the anxiety, the desperate joy that the park was designed to harvest.
And the historical documents supposedly back this up. The source returns to the apocalypse of Adam. It claims that the Great Flood, the story of Noah that exists in almost every ancient culture, was not a divine punishment for human sin.
But how does physical drowning solve a spiritual problem? If we are immortal fragments, killing the physical body doesn't kill the spirit.
It doesn't kill the spirit, but it traumatizes it back into submission. The theory argues that catastrophic sudden destruction forces the surviving consciousness entirely into physical survival mode. It collapses their awareness.
Right, if you are drowning or starving, you aren't meditating on your divine nature.
Your awareness shrinks down to, I need to find dry land and food or I will suffer. The flood was a system reboot. It re-anchored human consciousness in the base material trap.
It was a Creole alt-delete for reality. The demiurge hit the reset button because too many humans were waking up. The experiment was compromised by too much awareness.
And the sources theorize these resets happen cyclically. Some esoteric researchers cited in the documents suggest it happens every 200 to 300 years, pointing to supposed anomalies in historical timelines.
Or maybe 600,000 years, depending on the cycle. But the mechanism is always the same. The board is wiped clean through cataclysm.
And then new empty bodies are brought in, fresh players from the queue. And what do they need immediately to keep them compliant?
They need a reality to anchor them. Fake histories are instantly manufactured. Bogus scientific paradigms are established to make them feel small and insignificant in a random universe.
And strict dogmatic religions are put in place immediately to direct their spiritual energy toward worshiping the demiurge, keeping the new batch of players completely asleep to their true nature as gods.
Okay, let's bring it all the way back to the hook. The elites, the bunkers, the billionaires paying for surrogates. It feels like, well, think about what happens when you've bought all the properties on a monopoly board.
You have all the hotels, all the cash.
You're just walking around a dead game, charging rent to nobody. The game is effectively over. You have to flip the board over and start again.
That is the exact mechanism, a forced restart. The elites know they own the whole board right now. They know the flip is coming. So their entire existence is dedicated to surviving the board flip.
They're building literal, physical bunkers to survive the cataclysm. But you mentioned the surrogates earlier. If a reset wipes the board, how do billionaires survive it just by having lots of kids? A bunker, I get, but why the obsession with genetic lines?
The texts lean into a concept adjacent to epigenetic memory. The physical body might be wiped out, but intense trauma, ritualized behavior, and specific frequencies of consciousness are supposedly encoded into the DNA.
Wow. So they aren't trying to save their current physical bodies forever.
No, they are preparing a biological hard drive, their descendants. The theory claims they have figured out how to transfer their consciousness, or at least their suppressed memories, into their own DNA lines.
It's a cheat code to ensure they download back into the system with an inherent structural advantage in the next cycle.
Exactly. But to execute a plan like that across generations, you have to be utterly ruthless. This explains the cruelty of the elite. Why do they orchestrate wars that make no strategic sense? The theory posits they are forced to cultivate a deep hatred and disconnect from ordinary humans.
Because empathy is a liability during a reset. When the reset comes, resources will be absolute zero. They must be ruthless enough to wipe out the survivors and compete with other elites.
If you view the masses as your equals, you hesitate. If you hesitate, you die in the reset. Furthermore, the dark rituals, the compromat we hear rumors about, it's not just spooky magic or deviance for the sake of deviance. It's an administrative mechanism.
It's blackmail. It is how the highest unseen elites keep the lower level elites, the politicians, the celebrities, the visible billionaires, completely in line and subservient.
It's an initiation. If you commit an unforgivable act on tape, you can never betray the group. You are locked in.
But amid all this impenetrable darkness, the sources do introduce a threat of rebellion, a potential way out of the park. They point to the wisdom of Jesus Christ, another suppressed Gnostic text, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Bridging both Western and Eastern esoteric traditions.
In these specific suppressed texts, the narrative is completely flipped. Jesus is not presented as the obedient, suffering son of the demiurge sent to die for our sins. He's presented as an antagonist to the Lord.
He is essentially a hacker trying to break us out of the simulation.
Yes. The text claims he went around preaching, "We are gods." But the system's architects eventually violently suppressed that movement, rewrote the texts, and replaced his message with the dogma of all authority is from God.
Effectively turning a message of spiritual liberation into a tool of absolute subjugation.
Right. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead advises the exact same rebellion, just using different terminology. It tells the dying soul, as you transition out of the physical body, do not be terrified by the visions of hell and demons, but equally do not be seduced by the visions of a peaceful heaven.
Recognize that both are illusions generated by the demiurge to recycle your soul. Remember that you are the supreme divine and step off the wheel of reincarnation. Exit the cycle entirely.
But the system has an immune response to this kind of awakening. If you start waking up, you become a threat. The source warns that demons or dark energies aren't actually sent to punish sinners.
No, sinners are exactly what the demiurge wants. A sinner is just a very active, highly emotional participant in the material world, generating tons of energy for the park.
Demons are dispatched to ruin the lives of those who start asking too many questions. They target the people who are waking up, trying to distract them with sudden financial ruin, illness, or misery, so they fall back to a lower vibration of material panic.
They need you worried about paying rent, not meditating on your infinite nature.
Okay, we need to synthesize the architecture of this reality before we wrap up. Let's look at the two questions we started with. Rapid fire. Why the bunkers and the surrogates?
Because the cycle is ending. The board is about to be flipped, and transferring epigenetic consciousness and DNA into the next simulation is the only way the elite can cheat the reset.
And why does evil exist? Why is there so much suffering?
Because a roller coaster needs a terrifying drop to be thrilling. And we, in our infinite blindness, ask for the hardest ride available just to feel something.
So what do you do with this information? According to the text, you essentially have three options. Option one, you tell everyone. You spread the theory. But the catch is, if too many people wake up, you trigger the demiurge to initiate the reset faster to clear the board.
Option two, you stay quiet, you play the game, you abandon your morals, you try to acquire massive wealth, and you try to become an elite yourself to survive the coming flood.
Or option three, you exit the cycle. You refuse the ride. You remember who you are, and you step out of the amusement park entirely.
But you have to remember the ultimate terrifying catch of this entire philosophy. If you exit the cycle, you don't go to a paradise with harps and clouds. You return to the infinite. You return to the absolute crushing isolation of being the only supreme consciousness in an endless empty void.
And eventually, the silence of that infinite void will become so unbearable, so maddeningly empty, that you will gladly erase your own memory all over again just to get back in line for the ride.
It is a perfect, inescapable loop.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. If this theory is just a crazy internet story, just a modern myth built from mistranslated ancient texts and paranoid manifestos, then you have absolutely nothing to worry about.
Right.
But if the architecture of these documents is right, the very fact that you actively sought out this knowledge today, the fact that you are trying to wake up by analyzing this deep dive, means you might have just painted a massive target on your own back for the system's architects.
Because the scariest amusement park rides?
Always have the longest lines.